What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a special edition, and I do mean special edition, of an Inside Carolina podcast. We have the first sports fan. Governor Roy Cooper is joining Tommy Ashley and myself. First off, Governor Cooper, how are you?
Great, Joey. Glad to be with you and Tommy. And thank you
Well,
guys for the work you do, bringing such insight to Carolina athletics. That's fantastic.
See, now we're going to have to retire because I've never gotten a compliment from somebody in a sitting governor's seat to say something like that. But Governor, we wanted to speak with you today because obviously there are some issues around college athletics that are very hot topics, and one in which you dove in headlong yesterday in writing a letter to the president of the NCAA, former governor of Massachusetts, and NCAA President Baker, writing a letter to advocate for Tez Walker. And first thing I would ask you is, how did you hear about this situation?
Well, let's first lay it out that I've never done anything like this before. People know me as a hardworking governor, but also an avid sports fan. And obviously, I'm a big Carolina fan and a Carolina Hurricanes fan, in fact. And it's one of the things I like to do in the little bit of spare time that I have. But I had some friends approach me about this case. I'd been reading about it off and on because I do keep up with Carolina recruiting and Carolina sports. And the basic unfairness of this, with some of my friends who brought it, I started reading the case, particularly amidst the backdrop of what is now the Wild West of the NCAA with name, image, and likeness, which I think is a good thing, but obviously it is not controlled at the moment. And with a transfer portal that's really out of control too, seeing this North Carolina native, this young man whose family's here, who simply wanted to come home and play at the flagship institution after only having played for one other college football team. Everything was good. He was in classes for a couple of days. Then all of a sudden, boom, the rules change and he can't play anymore this year. To me, that was a basic unfairness. And, apparently there's another young man from Florida State who is in the same situation. And apparently we hadn't talked about it because I've met him one or two times. I don't know him very well, but Senator Marco Rubio wrote a letter to President Charlie Baker on behalf of this Florida State player because of the same rule. I agree with what the NCAA is trying to do in curbing transfers and second transfers. I think that's a good thing. But to apply this retroactively to Tez and as somebody who wants to come home to be with his ailing grandmother, who essentially really only played for one school, I think you can argue it's really debatable as to whether he is a two-time transfer. There ought to be an exception here. I think we've got broader issues with the NCAA. I worked closely with then Governor Baker of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for years as I was governor of North Carolina. We had a lot of things in common. He's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, but we worked together on a lot of issues, and I know him to be extraordinarily competent, hardworking, insightful. I was really excited to hear that he had been appointed as president of the NCAA because I think he has the ability to go in and tackle these problems. It's sort of like wrestling a giant bear to the ground to be president of the NCAA right now, but I think he's somebody who's up to the task. So I just decided to write him a letter about this because of the gross unfairness of it. I think it's kind of a unique situation. Senator Rubio felt the same way about the young man from Florida State. And I'll tell you, with a North Carolina family, a North Carolina young man, the unique, compelling issues around it, if it had been brought to my attention, I think I would have done it for any person at any North Carolina school considering this situation here. So I did it, and I don't know what the NCAA is going to do. I don't think anybody ever knows, particularly when there seems to be sometimes various rulings that people don't agree with. But I hope it helps, and we'll see what happens.
Governor, a lot of people ask, why does it matter for the governor of the state of North Carolina, any governor across the United States? So, beyond what you've spoken about as far as the NCAA and Tez Walker and the young man from Florida State, why should this matter for you as a governor of the state of North Carolina?
Well, I think every person in North Carolina matters. Right now, I've been working so hard because we know that thousands of North Carolinians are losing health insurance every single week. And it's one of the reasons why I've been pushing the legislature so hard to turn the key on this bipartisan agreement that we've all agreed to for Medicaid expansion that's going to get 600,000 families health insurance. Every one of those families matter. I've talked to many of them, most of them just hardworking North Carolinians trying to make it, trying to build a life for themselves and their families. Everything's important. I think this case with a young man who wants to come back home, be with his ailing grandmother. It's also a signal to the NCAA that you don't need to be changing the rules in the middle of the game to unfairly affect this young man and his family. I mean, he has a chance to be something special, not only in college sports but also in life and maybe potentially in the pros. So I'm also just a sports fan. So it might be the kind of letter, if I even were not governor, it may be the kind of letter I would have written either before or after, particularly knowing Charlie like I do. I just thought this was something. And in my letter to him, I don't know if it was in my letter or when I communicated with him the other day, that I know he's got hundreds of things to do, and this may not be something that's even risen to his level yet. I don't know. But I hope he'll take a good look at it. And I know Senator Rubio wants him to as well.
So you mentioned kind of the wild west that's going on in college athletics right now. Specifically, we're seeing a lot of things right here in North Carolina with regard to what might happen with the ACC.
Yeah.
You're looking at all these different realignments and things that are being proposed. How do the optics of these conferences in such a cash grab sit with you as a fan, but also as a governor?
It both as a governor and as a fan, it does not sit well with me to see these two big power conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten, gobbling up these schools and essentially decimating other conferences. The ACC now is sort of sitting in that almost no man's land here in third place money wise, but with amazing schools and an amazing structure. I don't, with the way the rules are written and the contract is written with the ACC is pretty tight. It's going to be a lot for a team to get out or to try to get out. And I know Florida State's making noises about that. I'd like to see it continue as the ACC. I realize that the money part of this is bothersome for the schools, but this is a strong conference with great schools. I don't want to see any of our North Carolina schools breaking out and going different places. It's the history and tradition of the ACC with University of North Carolina, NC State, Duke, and Wake Forest right here in this state. We are the anchor of the ACC. I just don't want to see anything happen to it. Things are happening so fast, though. I don't know what's going to happen, but I would certainly encourage this conference to work and try to make it. I know they tried a bit with Stanford and Cal out on the West Coast. That would have been a few tough away games for these young people. But in any event, we'll see how it all pans out.
It certainly will be interesting. You mentioned the money aspect of it. I mean, it's just astronomical. Some of the numbers they're bandying about. And speaking of money, and we're sort of jumping around a little bit here. NIL, name, image, and likeness. There's been some calls for, the government to get involved and to sort of set some guidelines. What do you think? And this may be a holistic question, but what do you think the state legislature's role should be or could be in the NIL debate? I mean, we talked about the transfer deal
Yeah.
and how that's created a wild, wild west, but NIL and the management or lack thereof of it as well in college sports has been a huge thing.
Well, first, I think it is a good thing for athletes to be able to make money off of their own name, image, and likeness, particularly when schools and coaches have been making money off of them for a long time. And I know the argument about it, they're getting a college education, room and board, and all of that. But just look at what the real value is of some of these players. They have I think the right, and now they do, to be able to make money off of their name, image, and likeness. That's a good thing. However, I think it can cause a real imbalance in the NCAA. I would like to see the NCAA itself grab this, make some rules. I think that potentially that congressional action might be needed. The state legislature, that's hard because you don't want to necessarily put your schools at a disadvantage when it comes to competition with other schools across the country. Probably congressional action, if the government is going to get involved, is the best way to do it. I know that's hard. It's hard to get Congress to do anything, but with guidance from the NCAA, that may be the best way to go.
Last question for you, Governor, and we'll let you get back to running the state of North Carolina. There's obviously a big game coming up in Charlotte. I know you're a fan. So 2 questions. Do you have anything lined up as maybe a friendly wager with Governor McMaster for the North Carolina-South Carolina game in Charlotte? And also, what are your expectations coming into the season for Drake May and Mack Brown's Tar Heels?
Well, for one thing, I feel good about this team. We all hope the defense has improved. That's a necessity. But when you've got the best college quarterback in the country, that's a pretty good advantage right there. Got a pretty good receiving core. We'll see how good it is maybe after this case is decided. We got 4 good running backs. I'm excited about the league. I think we probably have to bet vinegar-based barbecue versus mustard-based barbecue, and I'm not even sure I would even want to win that bet.
What do you what do you do if you win that?
That's right. But we will see, I think, very early what kind of team we have, because obviously South Carolina will be a test, but it should be a fun season. Just knowing that Coach Brown has worked so hard to recruit, I think, a good team, and maybe an even better one next year, although we likely won't have Drake May next year. But it'll be a fun year. The basketball team looks like it has taken some good advantage of the transfer portal. And, we've got RJ and Armando there as the base. I'd love to see Coach Davis have an 8 to 9 man rotation here this year. And it looks like you've got the kind of team that maybe you could do that, I would think, particularly with the latest couple of transfers with a couple of big young men in the middle there to help Washington and Armando. So I don't know. It should be an interesting year. I hope I can get to a football game or two and a basketball game or two, and look forward to the season. It's always fun. It's magical walking onto the Chapel Hill campus. I love to go. All 3 of my daughters graduated from Carolina. I'm obviously a double Tar Heel, so it's always fun to go back.
What's it like, real quick? What's it like being the first Tar Heel there in the middle of Raleigh?
I really don't feel. I don't feel that special, particularly when it comes to sports. I think I'm on an even plane with everybody. Everybody has their own opinions. I'll tell you, we are fortunate to have amazing schools in this state, like Duke University, like NC State. I brought Coach Krzyzewski over and awarded him the Order of the Longleaf Pine, and it was really funny. He was very engaging with us, and he said nice things, and just was really, I think, the kind of person that is a strong leader in North Carolina. And one of the young Carolina grads who worked on my staff came up to me and said, I kind of feel bad about hating him all these years. And of course, North Carolina State, one of the great institutions in the country, particularly with the engineers that it produces and Chancellor Woodson. We're just really fortunate. Some of us are so passionate about our fandom that sometimes that gets in the way of remembering how we're really all in this together. And as governor, I do get to see how our great universities help me with economic development. People agree we have the best array of public and private universities in the country and the best community college system in the country. And that's really exciting. And that's what it's really all about. The sports are and should be secondary to all of this. And we have to remember that. But it's fun to be a fan, and it's fun to talk to your friends the day after you win, and it's tough to talk to them after you lose. So that's the life of a sports fan. You have to shake it off, and you have to go on, enjoy it while you can, but you can't let it. My dad was a Wake Forest fan and went to Wake Forest, so he would have. He's not alive today, but he would have loved the success of Wake Forest. I saw an interesting tweet or something the other day when Florida State is talking about leaving the conference, and I don't know if this is the exact numbers, but some Wake Forest fan pointed, let it be noted that Wake Forest has won more football games in the last 10 years than Florida State, or something like that. It was a certain number of years there. So he would have loved it, but he also would get very depressed when Wake Forest would lose. So he spent a lot of time in depression sometimes. But I'm the kind of fan that I really get into the game. I love it, but I can celebrate a win quickly and shake off a loss quickly and realize that life goes on, and there are a lot of things that we got to get done. And I'm grateful to the people in North Carolina for giving me this chance to serve as governor of the greatest state in the country, and appreciate what you guys do, because I do love sports. And you may have heard my story. I don't know if you've heard my story. My claim to fame is not being governor. My claim to fame is that one Friday night in Rocky Mount High School gym, Roy Cooper, blocked Phil Ford shot. We played for rival schools. He played for Rocky Mount. I played for Northern Nash. Phil got 52 points that night, but by God, he did not get 54. So
that is awesome.
Phil and I have had fun with that over the years. It's actually, we triple teamed him. He had driven through two guys. The ball was sort of shoulder high, and I slapped it out of bounds. It was a blocked shot, but it was not up at the rim or anything like that. Phil's the greatest point guard in the history of our school. Now, you guys might have debated that, and Kenny the Jet might have something to say about that, but I still say Phil is the greatest point guard in the history of our school. So,
Governor, I'm curious as to why your staff hasn't put together a shirt of you in your high school uniform, Dikembe Mutombo waving your finger at Phil Ford.
That's a really good idea. I hadn't really thought about
it. I just feel like your team should be on that. But
Phil and I actually recreated the block shot in the backyard of the mansion here. So I had to remind him how it went. But he went along with it. So he was a phenomenal high school player. I was a junior, he was a senior. We never beat them when he was playing. My senior year, after he was a freshman at Carolina and won MVP of the ACC tournament, we beat Rocky Mount 4 times, 2 in the regular season, 1 in a holiday tournament, and 1 in the playoffs. So Phil Ford made a difference. I'll tell you that. That's for sure.
He is certainly legendary at North Carolina. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. We could do this all day.
Yeah, so I probably could. I'm really getting the hook over here now. So I am. I'll bet they know how much I love sports. Great to talk to you guys. Thank you for what you do.
We appreciate it, Governor. Hope to see you at Keenan sometime in the fall.
Yes, sir. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Governor.
All right.
Bye.
Joey, that was pretty interesting, my man.
That's the first fan, a sitting governor. Tommy, the first thing I would say that shocks me about this is I don't know how many politicians are actual sports fans, but politicians that can come in here and run down the upcoming roster for football and basketball. That to me, and I've seen him flex his his hockey knowledge before. I have not seen him kind of throw those sorts of nuggets out about basketball and football before. So it's pretty obvious that the guy that's in the governor's mansion right now is a huge Tar Heel, and we're certainly thankful that he made time in his schedule for us today to talk about some hot issues that he's actually involved with.
Yeah, and I think that's why it was interesting to me, and I asked him why it should matter, and of
Yeah.
course he talked about everybody should matter in the state, and that's accurate and all. But he also said he's also a big time sports fan, and so you have that, and you have him getting in, wading in on the Tez Walker situation, wading in and talking about realignment. And talking about NIL, the interesting thing to me is, and this is something that we lose, and we'll talk about this plenty at Inside Carolina. But I wanted to talk to you about it. We lose that aspect of realignment, and you lose the aspect of the big four all being together. And for me, being an older guy, a little bit older than you, and then you have people that are older than me, the big four of Wake Forest, NC State, and Duke and North Carolina, that was it back in the day. And that was a huge part of, Tobacco Road's not called Tobacco Road because,
Hmm.
there's a lot of tobacco fields. Of course, that's where it comes from, but everybody knows Tobacco Road is those four schools. And where does that part of the game and part of the history go when the conferences blow up or whatever? So to that point, and his point there about the ACC, that's why the ACC, and that's why a lot of people want the ACC to stick together. But I think it's fascinating to hear somebody, and it's really any governor, any statewide elected official, and all, they got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
They got to manage a lot of stuff, and to be able to keep up with it, and to be cognizant and follow sports and all. And he's a Carolina fan to boot, which is a good thing. I'm sure there'll be State fans and Wake fans and all watching this, and Duke fans upset about that. But to his point, it's a lot bigger than just an individual fandom. This Walker thing's a lot bigger than that. It's a lot bigger than that on realignment and all. So it was a very interesting interview there, and Joey, and it's all you. You put it together, my man.
Well, I'm in a lucky space where I know some people that know some people, but you're right, man. I think the realignment thing, would love to have heard because I'm sure I know that he has opinions about realignment and economically what it would do to the state of North Carolina. Because your opinion about or your point earlier about the big four, that makes all the difference in the world. And I think if you start thinking about the ACC, if you think about the ACC as we know it today, if it were to fragment and fracture off, or if it were to turn into something like the Atlantic Sun, and that's no disrespect to the Atlantic Sun, but economically, those two conferences are in a different stratosphere. Much similar to like the ACC is in a different stratosphere from the SEC right now. If the ACC were to become something smaller, that trickles down to the schools and to the towns in which those schools operate. I mentioned to them about the game in Charlotte upcoming. That's going to be a significant, even if they don't sell it out, it'll be a significant revenue generator for the town of Charlotte. If you think about the lodging and the stuff around the stadium, well before the NFL season starts. So, we don't often think about politics intersecting with sports that much. But when you have a governor that knows his stuff, and when you have uh, sports economically having such an effect and such an imprint on various parts of his job, it makes a lot of sense why it would be important to him. And then, to your point about the human issue around Tez Walker, he made it clear as day. If it would have been a student at any other school in these circumstances, he probably would have gotten involved as well. It just so happened that the kid plays for UNC and he's being kind of handled a little differently, shall we say, by the NCAA.
Yeah, and one other thing, and this is something I've mentioned a lot on these shows, is that going back to the ACC deal, you have the conference tournament that's been here an awful lot. You think about the
Mm.
economic
Yep.
impact of the conference tournament, in whether it's Greensboro or Charlotte or wherever. I mean, if Carolina's in the Big Ten or the SEC, and whichever one you choose to want them to go to, that's not going to be a thing for North Carolina. It may be a thing for the ACC to still exist in some form somehow, but if those schools aren't in that tournament, that's a big deal to the state and all. And so it's more than just North Carolina. circling it back to inside Carolina and North Carolina, North Carolina needs to be in a situation where they're financially on equal footing as the people they compete against, without question. And
absolutely.
right now they are not. But when you dig deeper into this whole deal, you've got those sort of issues. People talk about state legislatures getting involved and whatnot. Well, you would hope that state legislatures or politicians or whatever that are getting involved and weighing in on certain things or thinking about those type things and not like, well, we just want to tow along little brother or,
Yeah.
you know, the neighbor or whatever. So it's a lot more complex. And I think talking to Governor Cooper and listening to him talk about those aspects of it, I think it sort of sheds a different light on what we're all talking about in a
Sure.
deeper way that is more impactful to everybody. So anyway,
I don't mind saying to
it's
you, Tommy,
fascinating.
I feel like I missed a giant opportunity. I should have asked him if he got his tie from Johnny T-shirt. And I did not do that because I wasn't thinking about it. But you know, when you've got some time on a governor's very busy calendar, you know, you got to take what you can get. So I hope Johnny T-shirt, our fine sponsors over there on East Franklin Street, aren't upset with me for mentioning or for failing to mention Johnny T-shirt to Governor Cooper. But I'm sure he's a Chapel Hill guy, like you said, like he told us, double degree. I'm sure he knows. And when he gets to Chapel Hill this fall, I'm sure he'll stop in at Johnny T-shirts on his own. And he's probably got his own special governor's code that's even better than the 10% IC premium code, right? Like he's probably got like Gov UNC1 or something where he just immediately gets the governor's deals and they like fly it over to the mansion or something like that. So anyway, I hope our friends over at Johnny T-shirt aren't mad at me for missing an opportunity there, but we still love them and hope that you, all of you listening and watching the show, will love them as well.
Yep, wrap it up, Joey. We got a ton of work going on at Inside Carolina. If you enjoyed this podcast, you'll enjoy the other ones we got going on. You know, Joey doing work with Graham Boone, if you hadn't checked those out. If you're listening to these and you haven't listened to everything that came before it, you need to get on the feeds and listen to it. And you can get on the YouTube channel and watch it. You can see the tie. If you're on the podcast feed, you can see the tie that Joey's talking about. Governor
That was a
Cooper with the
choice.
Carolina Blue tie.
That was not accidental, Tommy. I'm betting on that.
Without question, that was a choice. And I chuckled when he first came on the screen. I was like, the man knows his audience for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, I appreciate you making time for me today and jumping on and talking with the governor. And hey, like you said, if that slight mention of realignment talk wasn't enough for the people listening, stick around because Tommy and the gang have a lot more realignment discussion for you coming up very soon on InsideCarolina.com. But until next time, for Tommy Ashley, for the first fan, freaking Governor Roy Cooper joining us today. Thank you so much, Governor. I'm Joey Powell. We'll catch you next time on InsideCarolina.com. Special podcast.